They say the house on the hill was once the grandest in town, a mansion that glowed with joy every Christmas. But now, it's just a crumbling ruin. No lights, no laughter, just shadows and silence, because the last family who lived there never made it to Christmas morning. When my friends and I decided to spend Christmas Eve there, it wasn't out of bravery, it was pure stupidity. We'd heard the stories, of course. Everyone had. But we were young, bored, and looking for a thrill. That's how all bad decisions start, isn't it? There were 5 of us that night. Sarah, the fearless leader, always the first to dare and the last to back down. She had a reckless confidence that could convince anyone to follow her, even into a place like this. Jake, Sarah's boyfriend, who acted tough but was clearly uncomfortable from the moment we suggested the idea. Mia, my best friend. Quiet and cautious, but she'd never let me go into something dangerous without her. Mark, the joker of the group, always ready with a sarcastic comment, though his jokes masked how scared he really was. And me, Alex, the narrator of this story, I'd like to say I was the sensible one, but if I were, I wouldn't have stepped foot in that house. The first sign that something was wrong came long before we reached the house. The road leading up to it was covered in ice, far slicker than any other street in town. It was as if the cold itself avoided the Matheson house, concentrating all its fury on the path to its door. By the time we arrived, the air felt heavy, the kind of heavy that presses against your chest, making it hard to breathe. We joked about it at first, about how ridiculous it was to be scared of an old house. But deep down, I think we all felt it. Something wasn't right. The front door was unlocked. Of course it was. Why would a house like this need locks? No one in their right mind would try to break in. The creak of the hinges sounded like a scream as we pushed it open. Inside, the air was colder than outside, and the faint smell of pine lingered. The living room still had remnants of its past life, tattered furniture, a dusty chandelier, and, eerily, a Christmas tree. It was ancient, with brittle brown needles that looked like they might crumble to dust if touched. But what caught our attention was the pile of presents beneath it. The boxes were perfectly wrapped, their bows intact despite years of neglect. Sarah, always the boldest of us, bent down to pick one up. "Don't," Jake whispered, his voice trembling. Sarah laughed, brushing off his fear, and tore the paper. Inside was a porcelain doll, its eyes staring blankly ahead. That's when we heard the first sound, a faint giggle coming from somewhere upstairs. We froze, our breath visible in the icy air. "It's probably just the wind," Mark said, though his voice lacked conviction. We all knew there was no wind inside the house. One by one, we made our way up the staircase, the wood groaning beneath our weight. The giggle grew louder as we climbed, joined by the faint sound of music. It was silent night, but distorted, like an old record playing on a warped turntable. The second floor was a labyrinth of hallways and closed doors. The giggle stopped the moment we reached the landing, replaced by a deafening silence. "Split up," Sarah suggested, already moving toward one of the doors. None of us wanted to, but no one wanted to look scared either. As I stepped into one of the rooms, I was struck by how preserved it was. A child's bedroom, untouched by time. Toys were neatly arranged on shelves, and a small bed was covered with a quilt featuring reindeer and snowflakes. On the nightstand was a framed photo of a little girl, her smile wide and innocent, But her eyes, something about them seemed off. Behind me, the door slammed shut. I spun around, my heart racing. The room was empty, but the temperature had dropped even further. My breath came out in frantic puffs as I tried the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Then, from the corner of the room came a soft whisper. "Why did you come here? Come in here seeking solutions. We need your help." My blood turned to ice. I turned slowly, my back pressed against the door. The little girl from the photo stood in the corner, her head tilted unnaturally to one side, her eyes, dark and empty, locked onto mine. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice echoing as if coming from a great distance. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. The walls seemed to close in around me, the air thick with an unexplainable dread. The girl took a step forward, and as she did, the floorboards beneath her seemed to rot and crumble. "Leave," she whispered, her voice growing louder with each step. From the hallway, I could hear my friends shouting, banging on the door, but their voices sounded muffled, as if they were miles away. The girl was just a few feet from me now, her face twisted into something that wasn't human. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. The door flew open and I stumbled into the hallway, gasping for air. My friends stared at me, their faces pale. "We need to get out of here," I said, my voice shaking. But the house wasn't done with us yet. The house groaned, its walls trembling as if alive. The faint giggle returned, but now it was everywhere, echoing through the hallways, seeping through the cracks in the walls. We huddled together at the top of the stairs, unsure of what to do. "Where's Sarah?" Mia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. We turned and realized she wasn't with us. Jake's face went pale. "She went into one of the rooms," he stammered, pointing down the hallway. "Sarah!" we yelled, our voices overlapping in panic. No answer. The giggle grew louder, morphing into a maniacal laugh that seemed to mock us. Jake bolted down the hallway, throwing open doors. One by one, they opened. We followed, our footsteps echoing in the oppressive silence. Finally, we found her in the master bedroom. She was standing in front of an old mirror, her back to us, completely still. "Sarah?" Jake said cautiously, stepping toward her. Her head jerked slightly as if she'd heard him, but she didn't turn around. We could see her reflection in the mirror, though, and it wasn't her. The figure staring back at us had hollow black eyes and a twisted smile. "Get away from her!" I yelled, grabbing Jake's arm, but before we could pull her back, the mirror cracked with a deafening sound, shards flying across the room. Sarah collapsed to the floor, unconscious. We dragged her out of the room and down the stairs, her body limp and heavy. The house seemed to fight us every step of the way. Doors slammed shut on their own, and the walls groaned like a wounded animal. By the time we reached the front door, it wouldn't open. No matter how hard we pulled or pushed, it wouldn't budge. The giggle was now a full-blown cacophony, joined by whispers and faint cries. "Through the window!" Mark shouted, grabbing a nearby chair and smashing it against the glass. The window shattered, and the icy wind rushed in, carrying with it a faint, mournful wail. Mark pulled a swivel chair back from the window and transported Marcel. We climbed out, one by one, dragging Sarah with us. The moment we were outside, the sounds stopped. The air was still, the house looming behind us like a silent predator. We ran until we reached the edge of the property, where the air felt lighter, easier to breathe. Sarah woke up as we reached the street, her face pale and her eyes wide with terror. "What happened?" she whispered. "You don't remember?" Jake asked, his voice shaking. She shook her head, and honestly, I envied her. I wished I could forget too. But some things stick with you, no matter how much you try to push them away. We told the police about the house, but they didn't believe us. No one ever does. They said it was just an old abandoned building and that we'd probably spook ourselves. But I know what I saw. We all do. That night changed us. We don't talk about it much, but every Christmas, when I see the lights in my own home, I think about that house. About the family that disappeared and the horrors that still linger there. And every year, without fail, someone else decides to see the house for themselves. I hope they make it out, but I wouldn't bet on it. Don't forget to subscribe for more chilling stories, and whatever you do, stay away from the Matheson house.